Hey, I'm Aaron. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life, I had what I thought was a pretty solid relationship with my family. Sunday dinners, spontaneous get togethers, the kind of closeness where you never really need an invitation. You're just expected to show up. At least that's how it used to be. Lately, though, things have felt off, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm being left out, but I'm not sure why. It started small, like a few missed calls or texts from family, things I could easily brush off. I figured I was just being paranoid or that it was my anxiety making me overthink. I'm prone to that, so I didn't think much of it at first. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was happening more often. Dinner invitations became scarce. When I did reach out, I'd hear about plans they had, but I'd always find out too late to join. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram, something I do mindlessly when I'm winding down, and I saw a post from my sister, Emma. It was a picture of the family gathered around a table at a restaurant. My first thought was, wait, how come I wasn't there? I mean, it wasn't even like a last-minute thing. The picture was clearly taken earlier in the evening, and I had no idea they were even going out. I casually texted my mom the next day, asking if they'd had a nice dinner. Her reply was immediate, but it didn't sit right. Oh, we thought you were busy. I felt a pang of frustration. I had literally made plans the night before to spend time with them, but there was no mention of this dinner until after it had happened. It wasn't just that dinner. Over the next few weeks, the same thing kept happening. I'd find out through social media or through my siblings that there had been family gatherings that I wasn't a part of. They weren't even mentioned to me beforehand. And the worst part? In the family group chat, there were these inside jokes and references that I didn't understand. They were laughing at things I wasn't included in, making memories that I wasn't there for. I tried to convince myself it was just my anxiety talking. Maybe I wasn't as close to them anymore. Maybe I had changed. Maybe I was just being oversensitive. But the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel like I was actually being excluded, not just ignored. The tipping point came one evening when I was chatting with my brother Michael on the phone. He mentioned something about a weekend trip the family was planning, and I casually asked when it was. The way he paused before answering made it clear they hadn't planned to include me. Oh, it's just, a small thing, he said. Nothing big? His tone was off, almost defensive, like he knew exactly what I was getting at but didn't want to address it. I hung up feeling a little sick to my stomach. I'd had enough. I needed answers. And I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. But I was still torn. Part of me wanted to just confront them and demand an explanation. The other part of me worried about how they'd react. What if they just brushed me off again? What if I was overreacting and they genuinely hadn't realized how much it hurt? After a few days of stewing in silence, I decided I couldn't let it go. If I didn't bring it up now, I'd never get the closure I needed, and this feeling of isolation would keep eating away at me. So, I arranged a casual brunch with my family, hoping for a calm conversation where I could ask about everything without making a scene. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had to know what was going on. In my mind, I was preparing myself for a simple explanation. Maybe they hadn't meant to leave me out. Maybe I was just reading too much into things. But deep down, I was afraid of what I might hear. What if they didn't want me around anymore? What if the distance wasn't my fault, but something I couldn't fix? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this conversation might be the beginning of something much bigger than I was prepared for. I walked into the cafe where I'd set up the brunch with my family, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. I was anxious, but I couldn't keep pretending like nothing was wrong. The weight of being left out had been building for weeks, and I was done waiting for an explanation that might never come. When I got there, my family was already seated. Mom, Dad, Michael, and Emma. The usual crowd, but the vibe was off. Everyone was a little too quiet, like they knew something was about to happen. I grabbed a seat across from them, my heart pounding in my chest. For a second, I almost lost my nerve, but I knew this was the moment I couldn't back out of. I had to get some answers. So, I started, forcing the words out. What's been going on lately? Why am I always finding out about family things after they happen? I couldn't help the edge in my voice. I tried to keep it calm, but I was frustrated. I needed to know why they were excluding me. Everyone shifted uncomfortably. Mom looked at me, her eyes flickering around the table like she didn't want to make eye contact. Dad sat back, his hands folded in front of him, looking like he was trying to stay neutral. Michael, as usual, was the one who spoke up first. I didn't think it was a big deal, he said, almost defensively. We just didn't think to invite you sometimes, but it wasn't personal, man. I didn't buy it. Not for a second. It wasn't personal? So, what? You thought I'd be too busy or something? I pressed. I'm not buying that. I can't even remember the last time you guys asked me to do anything. I see you all hanging out, and I'm not even part of it. The group chat, the dinners, everything. And when I ask about it, I get brushed off. What's going on? Mom cleared her throat but didn't say anything. She looked like she was trying to think of the right words, but she wasn't getting anywhere. Look, Aaron, Michael said, his voice softening a bit. I know it's been weird, but there's a reason for it. What reason? I asked, my voice rising slightly. What reason could there possibly be for not telling me what's going on? What reason is there for keeping me in the dark? Everyone fell silent, and for a moment, I felt like I was going to explode. But then my dad spoke up, his tone calm but somehow colder than I expected. You're making a bigger deal out of this than it needs to be, Dad said, his eyes fixed on me. We're just trying to avoid unnecessary drama, that's all. Drama? I snapped. What do you mean, drama? You think I'm just going to sit here while you make decisions without me? You're telling me everything's fine, but I'm over here feeling like a ghost in my own family. There it was. The frustration I'd been holding in for so long was finally spilling out. I didn't even care if I sounded harsh anymore. I was done pretending that I was okay with being treated like this. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and she suddenly started apologizing, her voice breaking. Aaron, please, we never meant to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. I was just trying to keep things calm. Protecting me from what? I asked, my voice a little quieter now, but still tinged with anger. You think I wouldn't handle it if you told me what was going on? You think I'd fall apart? Michael was looking down at his hands, his face flushed with guilt. It's complicated, he muttered. We didn't want you to get hurt. We thought it would be easier if you didn't know everything. He glanced at Mom, then back at me, but I know now that wasn't the right choice. I should have told you sooner. It felt like a punch to the gut. My brother, my older brother, had been one of the ones who kept me in the dark, who went along with whatever this was. And hearing him admit it like this felt like betrayal all over again. But why didn't you just tell me? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Why keep it all secret? You all knew something was wrong, but no one said anything to me. Why couldn't you just let me be a part of the decision? I thought it was the right thing to do, Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to feel hurt by the truth. I wanted to spare you. I stared at her, trying to make sense of her words. But there was no sense to be made here. They had lied to me, manipulated the situation, and kept me in the dark about something I had a right to know. So, instead of trusting me to handle the truth, you made that choice for me, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. You decided what was best for me without even asking me what I wanted. How is that okay, Mom? I didn't know what else to do, she said, her voice trembling. I just wanted to protect you from the pain I went through. The confusion in my chest grew. Protect me from what? I repeated. I was tired of hearing that line. I wanted real answers, not excuses. Before anyone could respond, Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He was staring at his phone, and it was clear he was trying to find the right words. After a long pause, he finally spoke again, but his voice was softer now. Aaron, the thing is, this whole thing started because of what happened with Kevin. The mention of Kevin hit me like a ton of bricks. My ex, the guy I had spent 4 years with. What did Kevin have to do with any of this? What does Kevin have to do with any of this? I asked, my voice low. I could see the guilt on Michael's face. It's complicated, he said again, but this time, his voice had an edge of unease. Let's just say there was a situation. We didn't want you to find out that way. It was too painful. The word situation felt like a punch. I could feel my stomach drop, my mind racing, but I couldn't process it yet. Not fully. I stood up abruptly, unable to take any more of this vague nonsense. I don't need to be here for this, I muttered, my throat tight. I can't do this right now. Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my things and left the cafe. As I stepped outside, I couldn't breathe. I was so angry, so hurt. I didn't know where to go or what to do. Everything had just turned upside down, and I had no idea how to make sense of any of it. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to process what had just happened. What had they kept from me, and why? When I finally sat down for that brunch with my family, I had no idea how much it was going to shake me. At first, everything felt normal. Too normal, almost. We were all at a small cafe, just the five of us. My parents, my brother Michael, my younger sister Emma, and me. The air was a little tense, but we managed to make small talk. I wasn't sure how to approach it, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to bring it up. The conversation turned toward an upcoming event and I just blurted it out. Hey, I noticed I wasn't invited to a bunch of things lately. Last night's dinner, the weekend trip, why didn't anyone tell me about them? I kept my voice calm, but I could feel the tension building up in the pit of my stomach. My mom's face immediately went red. I could see her eyes shift to my dad, and he just stared at his coffee cup, like he was hoping if he didn't speak, he wouldn't have to explain. Well, we didn't think you'd be interested, my mom said, her voice wavering. Mom, that's not the point, I replied, trying to keep my cool. You guys used to invite me to everything. What changed? Why am I being left out? There was a long pause, and Michael shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. Emma wasn't saying anything either. It felt like everyone was avoiding eye contact with me, and the more they did, the more it felt like something was really wrong. Finally, Michael spoke up. There's something you don't know, he said quietly, his voice hesitant. But it's complicated. I stared at him, waiting for him to continue, but he didn't. Instead, he just stared back at me, his expression unreadable. What does that mean? I asked, my frustration creeping in. I didn't want vague answers anymore. I wanted the truth. Can we just talk about this another time? Emma piped up, her voice shaky. She clearly didn't want to get into it either, but I could see the unease in her eyes, the way she couldn't quite meet my gaze. No, I said firmly, my heart pounding. I need to know. You're all acting like I'm the last to know something huge, and I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. Why am I being left out? The room fell silent. The air was thick with tension. I felt like I was suffocating in it, and I couldn't let it go any longer. Finally, my mom spoke again, this time softer. It's about Kevin, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kevin, my ex. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I had broken up with him almost a year ago, but the wounds were still fresh. I had never really gotten closure, and I had to admit, I wasn't exactly okay with how things had ended. What about Kevin? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but it came out shakier than I intended. Kevin? He wasn't honest with you, my mom said, looking down at her hands, twisting the napkin. There's more to why he left, and we didn't want to hurt you. I blinked. What do you mean, didn't want to hurt me? You guys kept something from me. What was it? At this point, I could feel my anger bubbling up. My family was always there for me, growing up through every breakup, every disappointment, and yet they were sitting here, telling me they kept secrets from me about the most important relationship I'd had. Michael finally spoke up, looking guilty. There was an affair, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We found out Kevin had been seeing someone else for a while. Everything went silent. The words didn't make sense at first. An affair? Kevin? The man I thought I was building a life with. It felt like the ground beneath me had been ripped away. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered, the hurt rising in my chest like a tidal wave. Why keep it from me? Why would you protect him of all people? My mom's face crumpled and she started to tear up. We didn't want to break your heart. We thought if we didn't tell you, you wouldn't have to deal with the pain of it. We were trying to protect you. I could barely breathe. Trying to protect me? How could they think keeping this from me would be protecting me? It felt like they had made the decision for me, like they didn't trust me to handle the truth. We made a deal with him, Michael added. We asked him to break up with you. We thought it would be easier if you didn't know the whole story. We never wanted you to find out this way. A deal? They'd made a deal with Kevin behind my back and I was the last to know? This wasn't just betrayal. This was manipulation. Why didn't you tell me the truth? I asked again, my voice shaking with emotion now. I had the right to know. You didn't give me that chance. My mom was crying openly now. We thought we were doing the right thing. We didn't want you to feel more pain than you had to. The truth hit me like a freight train. All this time, I had been wondering why things felt off, why I was excluded from my family, and now I know. It wasn't just about Kevin, it was about something deeper, something my family had been hiding from me. I stood up abruptly, feeling like I was suffocating. "I can't be here right now," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I need to leave." I walked out of the cafe without another word, leaving my family behind, feeling like I was in a fog. As soon as I was outside, I stumbled to my car and just sat there, gripping the wheel as I tried to process everything. My mind raced. How could they do this to me? How could they think keeping something like this a secret would protect me? It felt like my whole world had turned upside down, and I had no idea how to fix it. All I could think was that I had to find out more. I needed to understand what had really happened, even if it meant tearing the whole thing down. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. After everything came crashing down, I realized I needed to take a step back. I couldn't handle the constant barrage of messages and phone calls from my family, each one of them scrambling to explain or apologize in their own way. It was overwhelming, and honestly, just too much. I needed silence. I needed to think. I had to process everything that had happened without their voices in my head, without their well-meaning but suffocating attempts to fix things. So, I muted the family group chat, and I blocked everyone on social media. For the first time in weeks, I felt some semblance of peace, but that peace came with an ache, a dull, gnawing pain that didn't go away. It was as if I'd been holding my breath for so long, only to finally exhale and realize I'd been drowning the whole time. The pain wasn't just about being excluded. It was about everything. The betrayal, the lies, the decisions made without me. During the next month, I didn't speak to anyone in my family. Not a word. It felt like a detox, like I was trying to break free from all the toxicity that had seeped into my relationships with them. But even though I had this time to myself, I wasn't sure if I was healing. I wasn't sure where to start. There was so much to untangle, so much to unpack. I didn't even know if I could ever trust them again, let alone forgive them. At the suggestion of a friend who had been supporting me through all of this, I decided to see a therapist. I was hesitant at first, not sure if talking to a stranger would really help, but at this point, I was willing to try anything. I needed to understand what had happened, why it had happened, and most importantly, how I could start moving forward. In my first session, I didn't hold back. I laid everything out. My family's secret group chat, the deal they made with Kevin, the way they shut me out, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal that had followed. My therapist listened patiently, never interrupting, letting me spill all of my frustrations and confusion. After I finished, she took a moment before responding. She didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. Instead, she pointed out something that I had struggled to see through all the anger and hurt. While your family's intentions might have been to protect you, what they did was still manipulative, she said softly. They didn't trust you enough to let you make your own decisions. That's a big violation of trust, no matter the reason behind it. Her words hit me hard. It was validating to hear someone else say it out loud, to know I wasn't overreacting, but it also made the reality of the situation feel even more painful. My family hadn't just made a mistake. They had made a series of decisions that had fundamentally altered the course of my life without even asking me what I wanted. They had acted out of fear, not love, and in doing so, they had created a web of lies that was impossible to untangle. A couple of weeks into my no-contact period, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Kevin. I almost deleted it without reading it. My first instinct was to ignore him, to shut him out completely. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened the email, and it was a long, detailed message of apology. He admitted to cheating, lying, and everything. He said he regretted everything. The affair, the way he ended things with me, and most of all, how he had let my family pressure him into cutting ties quickly. He explained that my family had pushed him to end things cleanly, so I wouldn't be hurt, and he had gone along with it because he thought it would be easier that way. He said he was sorry for not being honest with me, for not pushing back when they all decided to protect me from the truth. Reading that email felt like tearing open an old wound. It took me right back to that time. Everything that had happened between us, all the confusion, all the lies, and suddenly, I wasn't just questioning my family anymore. I was questioning everything. How much of our breakup was my choice and how much of it had been orchestrated by them. I shared the email with my therapist, and together, we worked through the emotions it stirred up. She told me to resist the urge to respond immediately. Take your time with this, she advised. You don't owe him anything, and you don't have to make any decisions about him right now. Focus on you. Her advice was grounding, but it didn't make the situation any easier. I felt like I was living in two different worlds, one where I was moving forward, trying to heal, and another where the past kept pulling me back, dredging up old wounds I didn't want to face. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my aunt. She had been staying out of the drama for the most part, but now it seemed like she couldn't stay silent anymore. We met up for coffee, and without wasting any time, she got straight to the point. You need to understand something, she said. Your mom has a lot of her own issues with betrayal. She went through something similar when she was younger. She was cheated on, and it destroyed her. When this whole situation with Kevin came up, she was projecting that fear onto you. She didn't want you to go through the same pain she did, so she made decisions for you, thinking she was protecting you, but she wasn't. Hearing this was like finding the last piece of a puzzle I didn't even know I was trying to solve. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it helped me understand where they were coming from, at least where my mom was coming from. She had acted out of fear, out of a desire to shield me from something she feared would break me, just as it had broken her. That didn't make it right, but it did help me understand her behavior. At this point, I wasn't sure what to do with any of this information. It was a lot to process, but it was clear that my family wasn't going to stay silent forever. They were starting to come forward, one by one, trying to explain themselves, to apologize. My brother, Michael, was the next one to reach out. He called me one night, and this time, there was no avoiding the truth. I'm really sorry, he said. We've all been talking, and we know we messed up. I feel terrible for going along with it, for not standing up to Mom. We all should have told you the truth from the beginning. It was the first time I heard him speak like that, genuinely remorseful, acknowledging the damage they'd done. It was hard to hear, but it also made me realize that maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand. They were starting to see how deep the hurt went. Despite everything, I wasn't ready to let them back in just yet. But the fact that they were acknowledging their mistakes, that they were trying to fix things, gave me a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. Several weeks after confronting my family, I decided to cut off all contact with them. I needed time to breathe, to process everything, and to not drown in feelings of hurt anymore. My family no longer felt like a safe space, and an overwhelming sense of loneliness surrounded me. I didn't want to talk to them or answer any calls. I just needed silence. During that time, I started therapy. I knew that if I didn't confront my emotions, I'd remain stuck in anger and disappointment forever. Therapy helped me realize that being betrayed and ostracized wasn't easy to move past, but if I didn't start healing, I'd never move forward. A month went by, and I received a letter from Kevin. He apologized for everything that had happened, admitting that my family had pressured him to break up with me without ever telling me the truth. He confessed that they were trying to protect me, that they feared the truth would hurt me more than I could handle. Kevin said things weren't what I thought, but my family had decided to shield me from the truth. I read the letter over and over again, the weight of those words pressing down on my chest. I didn't know how to feel. Was I heartbroken, angry, or just deeply disappointed that I'd been lied to for so long? The next step in my healing was meeting with my aunt, someone I hadn't been in contact with during this whole ordeal. She was the one person who finally spoke up and explained everything that had been kept hidden from me. My aunt said that my mother's actions were rooted in her fear of seeing me get hurt again, just as she had been hurt in the past. Mom couldn't face the possibility of me being hurt, and she reacted in a way she thought would protect me. But all it did was push me away, isolating me from the family I loved. You know, your mom loves you so much, my aunt said, her voice soft but filled with concern. She just didn't know what else to do. She did wrong, but it was out of love, not malice. I didn't know how to respond to that. How could someone love you so much and still hurt you so deeply? But as much as I hated the way my family had acted, there was a part of me that felt a sense of relief. Maybe at least my mom didn't have bad intentions after all. I began to realize that the healing process wouldn't happen overnight, but I was willing to try. I wanted my family to change, and I couldn't just keep running from them. One day, I decided to reach out to my mom, asking if we could have a serious conversation. I didn't know where it would lead, but I had to try. The conversation wasn't easy. My mom cried a lot, and I couldn't hide the complicated emotions I was feeling. I was angry at her, but I also understood that she was doing the best she knew how. After a long silence, my mom admitted she regretted the way she handled everything, that she couldn't change the past, but she wanted to start over with me. Even though I knew the road ahead would be difficult, I felt a small glimmer of hope. My family was beginning to change, and while there was still a lot of pain to overcome, I felt like at least we could build a new foundation where the truth was acknowledged, and we were all willing to try harder for each other. Over the next few months, my family began to invite me to more gatherings, small as they were, but they were important to me. We didn't shy away from difficult conversations anymore, even though things were far from perfect. I began to feel like I was being welcomed back, and there were even a few times we shared meals together again, like we used to. Slowly, I realized that healing wasn't an event that could happen overnight. It was a long journey, but I started to believe that if we all tried, we could eventually mend things. And while I hadn't yet healed all the wounds, I could see change happening, and that gave me hope for the future. Things didn't get better overnight, and I won't lie, I still felt the weight of everything. But after a few months, something started to shift. My family, despite the mess we'd made, began trying. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it was often awkward and painful, but there was an effort. And sometimes, effort is enough when you've been left to drown in silence for too long. We started having family dinners again. At first, it felt forced, like we were all just going through the motions. But slowly, those dinners started to feel real again. We shared more than just food. We shared moments. We started talking about our feelings, even the hard stuff. At first, it felt awkward, like we were speaking a new language. But with time, it began to flow more naturally. In one of our first therapy sessions, I was able to sit with my mom and say the things I had needed to say for years. How I felt betrayed, how I felt abandoned. It wasn't easy. My mom cried a lot during that session, and I couldn't help but feel like I was still holding on to some of the anger I'd been carrying since the breakup with Kevin. But through it all, I could see my mom trying. She wasn't perfect, but she was there, and that meant something. She admitted she had acted out of fear, that she was scared to see me hurt the way she had been hurt in the past. I didn't know how to respond to that at first. How could I, when her decisions had left such a deep scar in me? But I listened, and for the first time in a long while, I began to understand. It wasn't just my mom, though. Michael started stepping up too. It wasn't a perfect apology, but he owned the fact that he hadn't supported me when I needed it most. He admitted that he should have said something sooner, that he should have pushed for the truth to come out instead of letting things fester. I didn't expect him to fix everything in one conversation, but just hearing him admit his role in all this felt like a weight lifting off my chest. My sister, Emma, was more reserved, but she came around slowly. She had been the one who seemed most reluctant during our earlier conversations, but as time passed, I saw her softening. It wasn't that she didn't care, it was more that she was trying to protect herself from the family's chaos, just like I had. When we finally talked about the whole situation, she told me she was scared. Scared of the mess, scared of the unknown, but she was there for me in her own way, and that was enough. As for Kevin, well, that was another story. After everything came to light, I did reach out to him again. I wrote him a letter just to clear the air. I wanted to hear it from him, wanted to hear the truth about everything. But when I got his reply, I realized something. I didn't need the closure I thought I did. His apology felt hollow, and his excuses felt weak. I realized that I had already moved on. I didn't need him to explain things anymore. I had my own life to rebuild, and he wasn't a part of it anymore. I wrote him back, thanked him for his apology, but made it clear I wasn't interested in reconciling. That chapter was closed. A few weeks later, I received a letter from an old family friend, someone I hadn't seen in years. It was someone who had known my family for a long time and who had always been close to my mom. In the letter, she mentioned that my mom had never really gotten over her own past, particularly her first marriage. She'd been through a lot of pain, and the thought of me experiencing anything close to that had driven her to protect me in ways I hadn't understood. The letter didn't excuse everything, but it gave me some clarity. It helped me realize that my mom's overprotection came from a place of fear that history would repeat itself. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt in the same way. I understood. And understanding, in some ways, is the hardest part of healing. We still have a long way to go. There are still times when things feel strained, when the cracks show. But we're trying. And for the first time in a long while, I feel like there's hope. Not just for me, but for my family too. We've made progress, but the journey's far from over. We're learning to communicate better, to be honest with each other. Slowly, we're rebuilding, one conversation at a time. I still go to therapy, I still work through my own stuff, but I'm not doing it alone anymore. And for the first time in a long while, I can say that with certainty. I believe things can get better, even if it's a slow process, even if we stumble and fall a few more times, there's hope. We're not perfect, but we're trying. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. So, yeah, I'm not okay yet, but I'm on my way, and that's enough for now.